Tyler and his date, Margot, wait at the riverside for a ship to take them to the most exclusive island for an exclusive dinner with a renowned chef named Julian Slowick. While Tyler is excited about this, Margot is indifferent about it. She takes her cigarette to smoke, but Tyler stops her, claiming it will destroy her palate and she has to feel the food. The ship eventually arrives, and they see several other guests, 3 young tech business investors named Soren, Bryce, and Dave, an elderly businessman named Richard and his wife Anne, a former film actor named George, who is way past his prime, and his assistant and girlfriend Felicity, and a renowned food critic named Lillian Bloom, along with Ted, the editor of the magazine she writes for. Just as they are about to enter the ship, Margot finds out that the ticket to the dinner is $1,250 per head. They enter the ship, and they are served a love oyster, which Margot says she will take abnormal oyster over, and eventually, they reach the island. At the island, all the guests are welcomed to the island by Else, the attendant. When it's Tyler's turn, she calls the name of Tyler's partner, Westervelt. Margot realizes she is not the real date. Tyler tells Else that she will replace Westervelt. After welcoming all the guests, Else takes them on a tour around the island. Tyler sees a cottage. He asks Elsa who stays at the cottage, and she says it's the chef, but they are not allowed to go there. Even the cooks aren't allowed to get there. They eventually go for their meal. Elsa tells them they can look at the chef while cooking, but they can't video them. Tyler goes to watch the cooks with Margot. He talks about how the meal is made, and he asks the cook for the chef. However, the cook looks at him and tells him to return to his seat. When they return to the table, Margot asks if he isn't bothered that she isn't a fan like him, but he says it doesn't matter. He narrates how he developed his love for food and says he had watched over 20 Slowick's food videos. Eventually, Slowick arrives. Elsa goes to tell Slowick about how Taylor changed his date, and he looks at him. Eventually, they serve the first meal, like a drink. Later, the first course is finished. Slowick tells the guests that they will be served soon, but he doesn't want them to just eat the meal because it is too beautiful to be eaten. Instead, they should savor it. Among the guests at the dining is Slowick's mother. Felicity tells George that she has gotten a new job and she is leaving his job. She tries to give him all his stuff with her, but he refuses it. Eventually, the first course is served. When Slowick explains the meal, Taylor talks to Margot, and Slowick looks at him angrily, so during the meal, Taylor asks Margot if she thinks Slowick is angry at him. She tells him he shouldn't be bothered about something like that, claiming that he is the one paying Slowick for his services and Slowick doesn't have to like him or love him. They eat the first meal, and it's time for the second course. Slowick tells them about the meal. He says that bread is a food for paupers, and since they aren't paupers, they are not going to eat bread. He gives them a plate of several accessories without the bread. Margot thinks it's disrespectful, but Tyler claims it's poetic. He says it makes them know their worth, and it's nice. Lillian thinks the meal is also nice, but the partners think it's stupid. Soren calls Elsa to ask her for bread, but she tells him that she won't be giving them bread. They try to brag with their positions, so Elsa whispers into Soren's ears that he will eat more than he can deserve in that dinner and then leaves. Margot refuses to eat the food while Tyler insists she should eat it. He eventually asks to take the food from her, and as he attempts to do so, he mistakenly drops her glass. Slowick comes to their table, and he notices that Margot isn't eating. He asks her why she isn't eating, but she says what's in front of her isn't food. He says it's food and she should eat it, so she says she is preserving herself for more food. He insists that she eats, and she stands by her decision. He angrily walks away, and Tyler tells her she is rude. After the second course, they serve the third course. Slowick tells them the third meal is a taco with chicken thigh. He shows them his mother and tells them his mother is drunk and she drinks every day. He says the taco is the Tuesday their Taco Tuesday, so on one Tuesday, his father comes home drunk and starts strangling his mother, so Slowick takes kitchen scissors to stab him in his thigh. He says he regrets stabbing him in the thigh, and if he knew, he would have stabbed him in his chest. He serves his guests the taco with kitchen scissors on it. and the dish is served with a special meal that he inscribes with several things about the guests. For the partners, he puts the company's fake tax, and Soren calls Elsa to ask how they got to know that tax information. He threatens to shut down the restaurant, but she tells him he won't be able to do that. The meal has a picture of Ted with another woman, which angers Anne, and Tyler's food shows when he is snapping the food against the company's instruction. He complains to Margot that he thinks Slowick is angry at him, but she tells him what he should do is return the meal. She tries to return it, but he screams at her and calls her a child. When she complains about his speech, he says he is the one paying, and he can talk to her anyhow. She angrily goes to the bathroom, and Slowick approaches her there. He confronts her, asking her why she is refusing his meal. He asks who she is, and after answering his question, she walks out. They are introduced to the fourth course, and Slowick says it's his sour chef, Jeremy, who prepared it. He says Jeremy is a good cook, but he can never be great because Jeremy wants to be like him. After introducing the meal, Jeremy kills himself. Everyone freaks out, but eventually calms down thinking it's not real, just part of the show. The guests gasps, and Richard says he is leaving. He takes his wife and tells her he will handle it, but Elsa asks her chef to cut off the hand he will handle it with. They cut off Richard's middle finger in his left hand. While they all eat, Elsa tells Margot that Slowick wants to see her. She goes to meet him, and he asks her who she is. She asks if he will let her live if she chooses a side, but he says they will all die, but he has to choose the side at which she will die, with the rich guests or with the service providers. She returns to slap Tyler and Slowick comes to serve a drink. He tells the guests their punishment. He says Bloom had destroyed several businesses with his critics, and he is sure she felt glad when he invited her. He goes to the partners of Verrick. They try to threaten him that Verrick owns him, and he admits he says that Verrick was his angel investor and he controlled the food he cooked. He shows them where he has hanged Verrick like an angel, leaving Verrick to die. Then he goes to Richard, saying that he has visited his restaurant more than 11 times and asks if he could mention a meal, but Richard couldn't. He calls Margot again, asking her if she has chosen a side. He says she is a service provider, and she has once been hired by Richard. He tells her he once loved his job, but those guests are why he now hates cooking. He invites them for the next meal. A cook named Catherine Keller tells them that she has been romantically approached by Slowick a couple years ago, which she turned down. Although she was not fired from her job, Slowick did everything in his power to make her life difficult. And as part of the show, she stabs Slowick in his leg as well. Slowick gave the males a chance to escape, and the chef, Catherine, takes the females to eat. During the meal, Margot confesses that her name isn't Margot but Erin. The males are unable to escape, and they are brought back to the dining room. Slowick reveals that he has been speaking with Tyler before the day, and Tyler knows he will die, yet Tyler hires Margot and brought her because Slowick doesn't serve a person. Slowick asks Tyler to cook and embarrasses him with his bad meal. Then Slowick whispers in Tyler's ears. Tyler walks into a room and hung himself. He tells Margot she is free, and now one of them. He claims he has told Elsa to bring a barrel, but Elsa forgot, so Margot should bring it. When Margot gets to the smokehouse, Elsa attacks her, claiming she wants her position. Amid the commotion, she stabs Elsa and finds a radio, then calls for help. In the dining, Slowick tells George that his offense is that the role he played in a recent movie was annoying. Margot eventually arrives with the barrel, and the ship comes too. Slowick threatens them not to ask for help. The Coast Guard comes. He asks if they need help, but they all don't talk. He recognizes George as his childhood filmmaker and gets George's autograph. In the paper, George writes that they need help, and the guard tries to threaten Slowick, but it turns out he is only a cook. Slowick goes to tell Margot that she is like the others, but she says his food is horrible. She says his food isn't prepared with love, and she is hungry. She requests for a cheeseburger, and he prepares it for her. She takes a bite and asks to take the others home. They pack it for her and ask her to leave. She takes the ship by the water and escapes. Eventually, it's time for dessert. He tells the remaining guests that they represent the ruins of his career, and he prepares a s'more dish and paints the floor with crackers. He wears a hat made of chocolate and marshmallows on the guests, and sets the restaurant on fire. Margot looks at the restaurant as she rides off, and when she gets to a safe place, she takes a bite of the cheeseburger and wipes her mouth with the menu. Now here we are left with some questions. Like, why do the diners in the film willingly do this to themselves? It seems as if the characters, all rich people who've rarely experienced discomfort in their lives, just play along because they simply cannot fathom what's happening to them. They're automatons, moving from one plush experience to the next, and Chef Slowik's plot has, essentially, caused them to glitch. How Margot was able to make her way out. Though he was intent on killing her along with everyone else, the order Margot gave was a way of expressing an understanding of Slowik and what had been troubling him all this time. He had become disillusioned with his work and alienated from his own labor. In a capitalist society, work is extracted from the workers until they no longer even understand why they are doing it. Margot was one of the few people who was able to uniquely understand this and give him one last chance to cook for himself. It wasn't a meal of fancy foams, but a simple one that was the most important to him because of how he loved making it. All the recognition and praise he had gained from wealthy guests who were just desperately seeking status as opposed to a solid meal had soured him on the entire system of dining that he had become a participant in. The night was about destroying all that, including himself in the process, so that he would no longer have to take part in it. That Margot was able to give him one final chance at creation before his ultimate destruction was what ensures the movie ends on a high note. In the final moments, just as she bites down into the burger while alone on a boat, we are left with something both a bit more personal and political to chew on. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe to our channel to get notified when we post the next recap. See you in next recap.